Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash. This is HeroQuest. My hands are a lot closer to the camera today because I'm standing up. I do that on occasion. I do have legs. So I have been asked a few times, a few different people, will Dark Souls, the board game, HeroQuest? And I figure there's no better place to ask. I am the definitive, authoritative Will It HeroQuest channel, so I will own this responsibility. And hold on, this isn't right. This is not the HeroQuest board. Whoa, that's kind of a sick transition, isn't it? Alter Quest, HeroQuest. That's got nothing to do with anything. Let's consider this a very casual, kind of off-the-cuff video. This has no script. None of my videos have scripts, by the way, but this especially has no preparation whatsoever. So this is the HeroQuest board we're working with. I have the Orc of Indeterminate Accent. I have, what did I call you? Scuffy? Snuffy? Oh wait, no. It was you. Sheffy. I have Sheffy and a couple of other goblins. An Abomination, a Dread Warrior, my Orc OC Rosa Teeth, and the lovely Harpy lady from Alter Quest. I really liked her, so I kept her out. My Druid Halfling is around here somewhere, but he's not close by. So let's get into this. What are we doing? We are going to take a very well thought out, serious set of criteria, very detailed, very involved, complicated on the back end, you wouldn't understand. And we are going to test out a game in terms of its minis, its tokens, its cards, its board, its dice, and its other to see if it will indeed HeroQuest. In other words, is the game worth getting in order to utilize its components in a homebrew fashion for HeroQuest? That's what this series is about. If you're interested in this idea, I did this with one other game already called Arcane Legions, and the link to that is on the channel somewhere. It's not linked below because I'm going to be way too lazy to do that. We're not going to keep this camera angle forever. I just want to show you Dark Souls, the board game, the Sunless City core set. There are multiple core sets. There are some expansions to Dark Souls. I have unboxed and overviewed this game already. I am going to hopefully try to learn to play it and see if I just love it. If I just love it, then I could see myself collecting the Dark Souls board games. But if I don't love it, I'm not going to keep it because this is a license smash and grab. If it's not good, I can't imagine it's not at least somewhat good, because Steamforged Games made a lot of these and they made them over a long period of time, and they listened to fans who had complaints about the rule set in places, and they revised their rules for this most current core game, the Sunless City, to answer for those. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about I already know, I'm just going to use the card for reference to remind you. Minis. Okay, so will the minis HeroQuest? I mean, the minis won't not HeroQuest. There are very few minis that will actually fight the board, and these are really not an exception to the general rule that any miniature will go fine in a game of HeroQuest so long as you agree to its thematic aesthetic. This is a Titanite demon. This thing looks pretty beastie. I mean, it looks monstrous. Some might even say a bit devilish. It takes up a 3x3 grid. It does have a circle base, but in contemporary HeroQuest, none of that matters. All of the heroes are confined to circular bases, and that's not a hero from HeroQuest at all, but I'm still going to count her in. And a monster of this size will go just fine in a room, especially of this size. It's oversized, but there are rules as written for oversized creatures. So he's not going to be able to move down the halls, and if you want him to anyway, then he can, because nothing is stopping you from doing that. I would definitely maybe take this approach where it's 2 at a time, 2 tiles at a time for every 1 square moved. He's going to block both of these tiles. Line of sight's going to be nixed. I'm not even sure that monsters should be able to move past him, and I think that that's how the ogres are treated. They just block all movement, all line of sight. This guy's huge, so that rule set makes sense anyway. The other thing about this miniature in particular, it's got quite a bit of a blank space on its base. You could use this to walk on. You could have this be a point of travel for either monsters or heroes. But if they are in this spot when this monster moves, either have the creature maintain its spot, so if the monster moves away, the creature is going to stay there, the goblin in this case, or it's going to piggyback in a manner of speaking, with the monster, so it's going to stay with it. Or you could have the entity take damage, so whatever's there is going to get whacked. It's not going to be able to defend itself. It's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if it's a goblin, in this case, it's going to die. It's going to suffer 1 body point and die completely while this thing moves. I think that would be a pretty fair thing to do, especially if you have a rule set for this monster such that it attacks before it moves. So if there are any adjacent miniatures, it attacks and then moves. This is obviously not the only monster that comes with Dark Souls, the board game. We also have Executioner Smaug. He's got the same blank spot on his base. He also takes up a 3x3 tile set. He's got a big hammer that will encroach onto other tiles, but you don't have to homebrew any rules over weapons that extend beyond the base of the miniature. You can choose to do that if you wish. So if the hammer could make contact, then that miniature is going to be damaged. But this is, in effect, mechanically no different than saying that he's just attacking melee. He's attacking adjacent miniatures. So it's just kind of a happy coincidence that the hammer extends exactly 1 tile beyond this miniature's base. There are a couple of other enemies, like this Sentinel. He's going to take up 2x2. And when it comes to oversized monsters taking up 2x2 and 3x3, that always is going to make sense. But like for these Anorlando archers, they're pretty much going to stay within your 1-inch tile. They're only going to encroach out a little bit, and the HeroQuest mini bases are smaller. So yeah, these guys will also HeroQuest. So in terms of miniatures, will they HeroQuesting? These guys will HeroQuest. It's not going to be so egregious a difference that they can't be used. You can use the Dark Souls miniatures in HeroQuest. Here is your very frightening Mimic. He'll take up a 2x2 tile space, and that makes sense because I don't have a treasure chest out here at the moment, but the treasure chest will be replaced by this, and then this guy will be able to chase you through the halls to make you pay for what you've done, which is bother him. Now, in terms of will the hero miniatures, or tarnished or hollowed or whatever you want to call the heroes of a given Soulsborne game, will they HeroQuest? The short answer is yes, as long as you agree that, again, the appearance is compatible with your game. I don't see a huge issue with this. I really don't see a huge incompatibility between Dark Souls, the board game, and HeroQuest. I do see that there are going to be a couple of instances where the scale doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, typically with games like this, but Dark Souls is not one of them. I think the scale is just fine. I don't have a single hero out here. Scale's just fine though. It's fine. It's compatible. It doesn't even really differ. It's pretty much the exact same scale as modern HeroQuest. So you will be able to homebrew more heroes, perhaps based directly on the source material of the Dark Souls game from which the hero is. All of your mobs will make sense. You'll be able to have these skeletons firing their crossbows, which we have archer skeletons in HeroQuest already, but these guys are a bit more gothic. They're a bit more horror. They're a bit more crossbow instead of bow. Darker fantasy, if you will, but not because they have a crossbow, but because never mind. So in terms of minis, that's a yes. Let's go on to tokens. It's going to be hard for me to argue one way or the other whether or not tokens will HeroQuest. So this is kind of a flawed concept, maybe a bit of a false comparison from the beginning. There's some measure of logical fallacies involved in this, but basically, I'm always going to say, I think, that all tokens from any or all games, no matter what is on the token, can HeroQuest so long as you provide a homebrew mechanic for the token graphic to slot in. So we have a lot of tokens that represent things like poison, like frostbite, like being burned. We have a lot of skulls. The skulls could be a form of currency in HeroQuest. The skulls could be used as tracking sort of devices, so I didn't punch those out before now, hold on. It's not like super imperative that they, never mind. So we have skulls. So we could do like a Space Crusade mechanic where Zargon gets so many of these skulls for the quest and he's allowed to kind of sprinkle them into the rooms here. So we've got like our tracking chips like Space Crusade has. And I know that people have come up with a similar system for HeroQuest before because Space Crusade and HeroQuest are cousins, at least classic HeroQuest and Space Crusade. And when your hero, I don't have a hero, enters the room for the first time, Zargon can draw cards up and replace the tokens with the level of monster. Now, it could be several different monsters that occupy that level, but the fact of it is that it will be random, so you have the potential for a different experience every time you go into the room. I was going to say you could probably use the skull tokens, particularly the ones that have numbers on them, to replace the skull tokens that track damage for body points in HeroQuest, but there's just not enough monsters in HeroQuest that have body points more than like 1 or 2. There are other tokens on here that represent things that should stay on the board and then change state, like these treasure chests, which become open treasure chests, and I have no problem with that. You can absolutely have open treasure chests symbols on the board, especially if you run out of 3D treasure chests. We've got a couple more tokens with different numbers of skulls, and that's sort of playing into my monster level hypothesis or paradigm, or whatever you want to call it. We've got some barrels that could be used to ignite so they explode. The exploding barrel concept is a great one if you have access to ranged weaponry. If not, you could still probably use it with melee if you planned on timing the explosion. So the moment that somebody comes in contact with the barrel or hits it, you say the barrel is now ignited, and then Zargon takes their turn, and then the heroes take their turn, and then the explosion's going to happen at the end of that turn. We've got a lot of other tokens that in a vacuum don't mean anything at all, but if you want to use these tokens to throw onto your heroes to build up a state that infers some kind of status effect, like these snowflakes to build up a frozen status effect, you can do that. If they get 5 tokens, they're completely frozen. It's game over. Other tokens like this hourglass will make perfect sense if you make some sort of mechanic that makes it make perfect sense. And then you've got your flasks and a couple of other things that exist within the Dark Souls universe that you can translate to make sense in the HeroQuest universe. The flasks you have in Dark Souls, you can heal using the flask. You can either heal your hit points or your, I'm forgetting my terminology, is it mind points? It's the stuff, FP. And your flasks can heal one or the other, and there are places you can visit to have X amount of heal flasks versus X amount of FP healing flasks, and you can go ahead and switch these out so that, you know, you can prioritize one type of healing over the other. I'm calling it healing, but it's restoring your magic points is what the FP does. Focus points? Man, it's been a minute. This mechanic I think would work really, really well in HeroQuest, and then at the next quest's beginning, your heroes have access to this crucial healing mechanic that once the flasks are out, they're out for the quest. There's no refilling them. I guess you could, if you want, make a point during the quest that could refill one of the flasks or more, but this is your healing system, and you could still have stuff that comes up throughout gameplay, like healing potions and so on, and you could treat that separately from the flask system. But I'm really getting kind of off topic, or I'm scaling out a bit too far from the video, so let's get back to the video, and we'll just go ahead and we'll give the tokens a free pass and say, yeah, those will HeroQuest. They're not compatible natively, but you would have to homebrew them in, but you can definitely do that. They're very inspirational for homebrewing. Cards is a bit of an anomaly as far as homebrewing for HeroQuest. It's easy to say, okay, let's follow the logic of the tokens. They're all going to be a yes. However, there is information that exists on the cards that isn't relevant at all to HeroQuest. It would require you to homebrew something to fill in the blanks. And I think that for some games that just say, hey, you got a sword, or hey, this event is going to happen, there's an easy transition, a translation that occurs where you don't have to do any thinking. You take a look at the deck of cards and you say, I can use these for HeroQuest as they are because I have a system in place that will use these and make them make sense. Other times, you're going to get cards that are not built with combat dice in mind, or at least not the HeroQuest kind of combat dice, or they refer to mechanics that don't exist natively in HeroQuest, and this will push them further and further and further away from being good cards to use for homebrew. You can use whatever you want, but whether or not it's good, that's what I'm here to determine authoritatively for you as the leading voice in Will It HeroQuest. So the cards are going to be quite full of this information, and a lot of the cards have these requirements on the left side that go across the 4 different stats that are in Dark Souls. Like this, the Great Magic Weapon, this is going to require 12 of these 2 stats. It doesn't require anything in these 2 stats, but This doesn't make sense for HeroQuest. Is the item cool? Sure. Is the lore of the item and the idea of what it's supposed to do great for your fantasy setting? Oh yeah, but is the requirement going to make sense? No. Do the dice callouts at the bottom here and colors make sense? No, not unless you're using a power dice system like Nehecaron's power dice. Does anything else on here even remotely resemble something that you could use for HeroQuest at first glance? No, you would have to do a ton of homebrewing to try to retrofit these into your game. But if you are using stat systems in HeroQuest like faith, dexterity, strength, and you are assigning point values to those and you're making those numbers go up with an arbitrary level system of some kind, then that could work. But we're talking about fundamentally changing the game to get these cards to be compatible. So I have to say, on a technicality, that's a no. Well, the first card was upside down, but not the rest of the deck. Great. And it's pretty much all the cards except for the encounter cards, and the encounter cards would work, but at this point they're kind of a minority. Plus, the HeroQuest health system is pretty much every enemy has one body point. Some enemies have more than one. Something like the Hardy Bonfire Ascetic. Increase the starting health of all enemies in this encounter by 1. If the party completes this encounter, they receive a number of extra souls equal to 2. Discard this card at the end of the encounter. That's just going to require way too much translation for it to speak HeroQuest fluently. The other cards are okay. We have a set of treasure chest cards you could absolutely use for HeroQuest because they are, yes, there's treasure, yes, there's treasure, yes, there's treasure, yes, there's treasure, no, there's a mimic, and you could use that with the mimic miniature to make that make sense. The enemy cards do kind of make sense because they use a lot of jargon and symbology that's not present in HeroQuest at all, but it does make sense if you can infer that this monster's AI is telling it to move up 2 spaces. I'd have to refer back to the rulebook to remember what these symbols mean, but essentially it is, here's what the monster can do, and if the monster can't do that, then it's going to do this, and then it will end its turn. Now, this would require a little bit of translation, and you're obviously not going to replace all of your monsters with these algorithmic movesets. You would just be using these with the monsters that they're compatible with. The illustration on the card basically marks that for you, and they have to have these different behaviors because why would the mimic act the same as the sentinel? They should have 2 different move sets as far as what they're going to do when you come into the room. How are they going to move? How are they going to attack you? How are they going to use their abilities? These event setup cards are not going to work for HeroQuest because they refer to the board and the types of enemies that can go onto the board configurations, and all the balance and design is inherent in this deck. So I have to say, for cards, this is most overwhelmingly going to be a no. I would not buy this just to get access to the cards. The cards could inspire you to make your own system, but we're going to say that that's true of pretty much every game out there, unless I find one that has a card system that's so bad I have to give it a negative rating. So we're not going to count that because, all things being equal, that's every game anyway. A set of poker cards could give you inspiration to make a new deck of cards for HeroQuest. So cards are going to be a no. Board time. The boards in Dark Souls are not comprised of tiles. They are not comprised of rooms, unless you want to call this a room. They are comprised of nodes, and the heroes and monsters' behaviors will tell them where to move, what node, what to do once they get on that node, and the different symbols on the nodes will apply additional effects for that monster or hero during their turn. We have a couple of boards that call out specific entities from the Dark Souls game, and no doubt that could still be used if you are going to use the miniatures and the cards from the Dark Souls game, but this is not a Will HeroQuest Dark Souls, this is a Will Dark Souls HeroQuest. And unless you are willing to fundamentally, completely change the way that you are playing HeroQuest, you will not be using these boards. I know in a previous video with Arcane Legions, I said you could turn HeroQuest into a war game by kind of utilizing the rule set in between quests, and that's really no different here, but this is the dungeon crawl of Dark Souls. This is how the encounters work. These are not things that I would use in between dungeon crawls. In HeroQuest, I would just use the HeroQuest board, and for that reason, I have to rate the board a no. The dice is next, and I love good dice, and the dice here are really no exception. If you want to break it down, a D6 in its most perfect form really is just going to roll off of my table. Hold on. I really didn't think the edges were that rounded that it would just go launch itself like that. Stop! This is because a D6 basically has one unique number on every one of its faces. A regular D6 with 1 through 6 pips on each face. The disadvantages of that are dependent entirely on the context of the game you're playing and why you are rolling the dice. Sometimes you just need to know, does the thing hit or not? And the face will tell you if it does hit or not, and the visual of that will work much more effectively than it will be if you are having to count pips every time you roll. Sorry, Warhammer fans. Dark Souls dice are comprised of 4 different colors. I said 4 different colors. Orange, black, blue, green. 3 of these are levels of dice. They have differing amounts of swords per face from 0 to 4. And the amount of swords and the frequency of that amount will increase as you go up in dice level. I always love this tactic. However, this is for attack only. This is not going to really conform to the HeroQuest system, wherein all of the dice always use all 3 values of attack, hero defense, monster defense. So while these technically will HeroQuest, you would need to change the combat system in some way or only apply these dice to certain things. Perhaps a special weapon that you pick up will allow you to roll an orange dice, and the number of swords on this orange dice are equal to the amount of skulls you would roll with just the 1 die. That would be pretty OP. That would be amazingly powerful, so I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you were a really late game. Having said that, I want to talk about these dodge dice. These are pretty cool, and you could definitely take and roll one of these alongside your defense roll to see if your character can dodge. And in Dark Souls, there are attacks that have dodge values, so dodge difficulties. You would get attacked and see if you could dodge it. I'm not far enough into Dark Souls to know whether or not you would be able to increase this amount with perhaps a level up or a certain kind of item or anything, but you could definitely homebrew that in HeroQuest. So if you have the boots of dodging, that's going to give you the advantage whenever you are defending to roll a dodge die. And if you roll this die and it successfully lands on a dodge face, then you will be able to dodge the attack entirely. Now that's kind of OP, but it looks like we have a 50% chance, less than 50% if I'm the one rolling it, to get that dodge in there. Perhaps you can sacrifice one of your defense dice and roll this, or you can say, I'm not going to roll any defense dice, I'm going to try to dodge. I think that would be the most reasonable rule. So somebody comes at you and they roll, you have to say before their roll is revealed, before the monster has rolled their attack, I'm going to try to dodge. So now if you get hit, you're going to get hit with the full might of whatever that attack roll is, and you might not even dodge because you only have a 50% chance of dodging. But if you have a class trait, that could be another die, or a racial trait, that could be another die, and then you could have a very high chance of dodging. Other characters might have really low equipment requirements, really low equipment accessibility, like the wizard, and they just can't equip hardly anything in the game. So you could give them a little bit of a dodge chance. And you could separate this into 2 different categories: physical dodge, ranged dodge, magic dodge. It's a trap dodge. What's your trap dodge score? These would work really well for the trap dodge idea, I think. So for that reason, I'm going to say that the Dark Souls dice are a yes and a no. Yes for the dodge dice, even though you can just say you're going to roll, and if you roll a skull, that's a successful dodge. You don't need a whole new set of dice to do that. But I mean, if we start splitting hairs like that, you would replace the HeroQuest combat dice with regular 1d6s, and you would think no more about it. You would be at the peak of perfection, according to some people. I am visual. I like pictures on my cube faces. I will fight for the little sword, shield, and skull icons on my dice all day long. So, sorry, I think that it's better. Finally, I have an other category, and I'll explain what that means, but not before actually putting the HeroQuest entities on this Dark Souls board, because I thought that might look cool. There's a component with Dark Souls that doesn't really fit any of the other component categories, and this is going to be true of some of the other games that we do this comparison with. This is your campaign board. HeroQuest doesn't have this. Some games do have a board similar to this. This is basically the track that tells you when you're going to go from encounter to boss encounter, and encounter to boss encounter. And a campaign track would work pretty well with HeroQuest, This one's got a bunch of numbers on it that would not make any sense in the context of HeroQuest. This one has spots for cards, equipment cards. That's the size that these are. That also don't make any sense for HeroQuest. So I would have to say, in terms of the other category, that this game would be a no. Now, whether or not you would buy this for one or any of its components at any price is completely subjective and completely up to you, and only you can justify the value of it. But as for me, I am going to rate this on a scale that ends in 10. And as far as I am concerned, my own personal opinion, me, myself, and I, Dark Souls the board game, The Sunless City, Will It HeroQuest, is rated a Titanite demon leaping at patches to crush his skull into the pavement out of 10.
I'm tired of the analytics. They either say you didn't subscribe but you watched the video, in which case you're a loser. Or they say you didn't watch the video at all, in which case you're missing out because you're a loser. So you'd better subscribe, and you'd better watch the video, and you'd better comment, and this camera better focus on my beautiful face.
Thank you for watching, brave heroes. I'll see you in the next exciting adventure. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your journey. Farewell for now.